Hey out there, just about 1:30. Let me know if you can hear me. If someone just wants to respond saying yes, just to make sure we're on board. Anyone in the chat? Awesome, thank you, SB Zoo fan. Welcome. So my name is Ellie. I am one of the California Condor keepers here at the Santa Barbara Zoo. Welcome back if you have done this before. And if you've seen me before, I'll try to do some different topics today. But just really quick about zoolife, this amazing idea that we have here. They're being really funny again. So it's interactive. So at any point, if you want to move the camera, any of you, you're able to zoom in, zoom out, move around. I kind of have it focused already on them of the ones I could find. There's 3 in there right now. And then also, please feel free to ask me any questions during the chat. I will be looking at it periodically just to make sure I don't miss anything. Just about me real fast. Like I said, my name is Ellie. I've been working with these condors for almost 7 years, basically the entire time I've been here, and I've been lucky enough to do that. They are one of my favorite species of animal in general. Vultures are just spectacular animals, and my favorite thing to do is to either change someone's mind about vultures or at least get them interested about vultures and not make them such scary, ugly, disgusting animals. Or mean, because they kind of get that reputation from various things that we've seen in our, probably our childhood cartoons and things like that. So vultures, I'm very passionate about them, so I'm really excited to do this talk and just share these amazing creatures. The fact that we have them is pretty significant. There's not many zoos that have California condors, but there are a few: the San Diego Zoo, LA Zoo, Oregon Zoo. And then us, as well as a couple other facilities. So it's really an honor to be able to not only work at a zoo that has them, but also be able to directly work with them. Now, I don't actually do anything as far as hanging out with them or touching them or anything like that unless it's under restraint for medical purposes. So we're very hands-off with our California condors here. It's kind of a different way of zookeeping. We don't really have personal relationships with the birds. They don't have names. They actually just have their numbers, and that's how we identify them. So I don't really spend a whole lot of time trying to work on an individual relationship with those birds. In fact, we kind of want the opposite. We do need to go on exhibit and take care of the things on exhibit, such as the waterfalls. Great view. The waterfalls, all those plants in there, all sorts of things is up to the keeper. And these condors are juvenile, so that translates to being very curious and rambunctious and destructive. So they often like to get into some trouble into the exhibit. So I do have to go in there, clean the pools, change the filters, things like that. The team and I do, not just me. And when I'm in there, the response that I'm hoping for is that they will stay as far away from me as possible and that they do not get close to me. So they're not really an animal that you're ever going to see us hand feeding. In fact, we never show them food at all as far as coming from a keeper. So the food just kind of appears. I think they're pretty smart and they kind of have a general idea that it is coming from us. But we never walk out onto that exhibit holding that food and then putting it down. It'll come from 2 places. It either comes from the cave, which is what they're usually standing on top of, because it gets a lot of great sun. But inside there are some like food ports. So keepers go behind there. The birds can't see us, and we just shove it through a hole. And then also on the bottom of the exhibit, which is kind of hard to see, we have some holdings where the condors are going to go inside to actually retrieve that food. And depending on the condors, how long we've had them, how old they are, how much experience they have here at our zoo, we're able to open those doors, they come inside, eat the food, and then we can actually close those doors if we ever needed to get our hands on one of them. So we do annual exams on them. We only have to grab them up once a year. And so it does take us quite a while to train them to go into that holding space in order for us to, I don't know if you guys can see that, but they're on the ground running around. being quite hilarious at the moment. There we go. They're playing around in the soft waterfall right there. But we are able to train them to come into that space and then get our hands on them once a year. And we just check for various things, making sure they're medically doing really well. So we'll take blood samples, we'll check their feather quality, we'll check their eyes, their mouth, their beak, their feet. Everything that you would, when you go to a doctor, you kind of get just a wellness check. And that is pretty much what we do for them. We also check their tags, make sure that the tags are sturdy. They're not losing any of the material or the numbers are being worn off. We really need to see those numbers. We kind of rely on them to be able to tell them apart. Like I said before, we don't have names. So those numbers are really what give us an indicator, because sometimes they look exactly the same, especially when they're all sitting in a very similar position and you cannot see their tags. They're very hard to identify. One of them currently is slightly older than the rest of them, and he's kind of acting more of a dominant bird. So he actually has less feathers on the top of his head. They are all losing their feathers, but he seems to be losing his a little bit faster than everybody else. And that could just be that he's maturing faster. He's near females, so that's entirely possible that would happen at a younger age. Not really at that life. They're at about 4 years old, so they're not really at that point where they should be doing that. And that's actually what I wanted to make the talk about, is these youngsters, and just the life of a condor is very long. And it's not like most birds that people are more familiar with. So without going too deep into the conservation aspect, basically these birds have been really hard to bring back, not necessarily because we don't have the resources. It's really more because they spend a really long time growing up and they spend a long time with their parents. So a pair of condors, which usually mate for life, will have one egg every other year or so. So that's only one condor being born in a small area. And if you want to compare that to maybe a different bird species like a duck, so a duck can lay 12, 15 eggs, and maybe do that more than once in a year, and that's a whole lot of ducks. And that's why there's usually a lot more of certain species than others. So because the life stages are just a lot slower rate, the condors take a really, really long time to grow up. So of course, if we're going to be following one its entire life, it's going to take a lot of time to find out as much information as we can. And with all the information that we do have about the condors, we don't actually have a real answer for what their exact lifespan is. We know that they are capable of living into their 60s, even their 70s. But there haven't been that many on record that have died of just old age. There's usually some other outside factor that has interfered. Of course, the longer we study these birds, the more information we get about them. But we do know that they do live a very, very long life. So these 4 birds right here, they're only about 4 and 3 years old. One of them is a little bit younger. He's white tag 46. His head is the darkest of the group. So right now he's kind of easy to pinpoint. But these birds have a really long life ahead of them. And right now their life is do a couple different things. Right now they are helping us educate the community about the California condor. And at the same time, we're allowing them a location to grow up and get to a point where they are able to be a part of the actual reproduction part of the Condor program. But they need a spot to be for a while until they grow up, because it takes so long. They're usually going to hang out with each other until they're about 6 years old before they're actually going to start trying to find other condors. Good question. Where did they come from? So they a couple of them came from different places. We have 2. They're fighting right now. We have 2. They both have the white tag. Their numbers are 860 and 846. They are siblings. They're only a year apart, and they came to us from the LA Zoo. So they were bred and hatched out at the LA Zoo, and then we received them about at the end of 2019 and the beginning of 2020. So we got them not that long ago. We haven't had them for a huge amount of time, but we've already seen a lot of changes in them in the couple years that they have been here. And then the other two actually are a little bit different. And I might confuse the stories, and I apologize. There's a lot of Condor stories in my brain. But they are both birds that were actually out in the wild, I believe, and had to come in for different reasons, showing not quite the correct behaviors that you would want for a wild bird. 946 is sticking his head in the rock, which is one of the things that I mentioned about them being very destructive. They're very curious, very playful. So they love to find things that they can pick up. They'll play tug of war with each other. They'll throw sticks. I find all sorts of things all over the place from these youngsters. And they absolutely will break things that we have to then fix. So we have to stay on top of their behavior and make sure that we're very in tune to what they're doing. We also appreciate when guests see things and let us know, hey, they were playing with a sprinkler. It happens a lot. They are very much troublemakers, but they're the best troublemakers. I could spend hours watching them. They're so much fun. Not that older condors are not fun. They're majestic and beautiful and very set in their ways. And that is what is very different about these youngsters. They're still figuring out how to just be a condor. And normally in the wild, they would actually find a slightly older bird. So a bunch of 3 and 4-year-olds might find like a 5-year-old and buddy around with that one and learn the ropes from that bird. So they're really, really, really social creatures, and they really learn a lot from just watching each other do things. So you don't really find them alone. They're going to be with either one other or a couple others. Vultures in general, whenever you see them eating in a group, like I said, it's usually just a group of vultures. It's not often just one, it's a couple. They're not really territorial in that regard, in that they're going to ward off a bunch of vultures from eating. What they will do is have more of a hierarchy within that group. So the more dominant birds might ward off the less dominant birds, but they're not going to necessarily claim a carcass as their territory. They're very much like a kinship. So they're all going to work together to tear apart a carcass, especially if it's something that's really, really large that requires a lot of work from all of these birds together. It would take a lot of energy, a lot of time for just one bird to tear into something like that. Sorry if it's graphic. But they're going to learn how to do all of that from each other. They take cues from each other. And at one point we did have another bird that was slightly older that was with us. And she was magnificent, and that's just my honest opinion, but she was great at mentoring them and really would kind of put them in their place when they were being a little too troublesome. But she would kind of show them what to do. She was helpful in trying to help us train them to go into the holding. She was kind of sometimes a little skeptical. So if she was skeptical, everybody else was skeptical. So they really kind of tuned into her behavior in order to follow suit. Gosh, they're cute, aren't they? Yes. Some people think they're ugly, and I think they're just the cutest animals. But that's, again, my humble opinion. So when that bird actually ended up needing to go back to the LA Zoo to breed, which is a fantastic reason for us to ever say goodbye to a condor, then we had just these youngsters, and I personally was a little worried that we just had a bunch of 3 and 4-year-olds to kind of rely on each other to learn all the social cues and social dynamics. And I think they're doing great. I think that 872 has really kind of shown a little bit more dominance lately. When we first got him, I say that I'm going to run out of time, but I'm just going to keep going. When we did receive 872, I do remember one of the things that was interesting about him was that he was interested in us, which is, like I said at the beginning, not the reaction we really want. We want them to fly away from us, move away from us, not be near us at all. And he was pretty curious and wanted to sit and watch us. And he still sometimes does that. So I've been just watching him grow up this last couple years, and he's kind of gone from this really curious but timid bird that's interested in the keepers to he is much more interested in the other birds, especially 860. And he's more just interested in being more of like a condor. But there are moments where I go in there and all the other birds have flown away and he kind of lingers in the trees for a little bit. So I do have to be slightly assertive. I'm not going to scream or anything like that, but I will kind of lift my arms a bit, maybe clap a few times to get them to move away from me, because we don't want them to come near us. That is something, we don't want them to be habituated to us. We don't want them to feel comfortable with people. And that's kind of in preparation for when they are going to be paired with another condor. Do they know how to react to this condor? Do they know how to do all the proper condor behaviors in order to be successful in breeding? And then also, we really want our condor program to be as successful as possible. And I'm talking about Fish and Wildlife, not just Santa Barbara Zoo, the whole program and everybody who's contributing. Of course, one day we want to be able to not have to interfere or be as heavily involved as we are. So maybe in the future, there's always that potential that juveniles that have been in captivity might be able to go back into the wild one day. So we need to do our part and start them off for success, so they don't get used to people and then run towards them in the wild like you see some birds do, which is imprinting. And that is when their brain actually chemically changes to make them think that they are related to the individual that has helped raise them, even if it's a different species. So if we can do everything we can to help them remember they're a condor, we're a human, that's what we're going to do. I'm going to read this comment really quick. Must be difficult as a zookeeper to not be able to interact with them so closely. Rewarding. You hit that on the nose, because don't tell my other animals, but condors are probably my favorite. I like vultures and birds of prey, but condors specifically. And everyone knows, my fellow keepers know, they don't like me. In fact, they're very afraid of me, and they have very strong reactions when I walk by. And at first, I had to try and remind myself not to take that personally, because, of course, you want every animal that you love to love you back. But that's not a realistic view as a keeper. You have to be able to work with the animals that don't like you. And the reason why they don't like me is because I've actually held them and restrained them for exams, and they remember that. And it's been a long time, about a year, since that I've actually done that. But they remember that I was the one that went in and had to help hold them so that our vet can examine them. And of course, we wish we could explain to them why we're doing this, but you can't really do that with them. So they have that in their brain. They know that I was that person. But I understand that that is my role as a keeper, and not being able to be a favorite of those animals and just respecting them from afar. And I also have to be very careful about my actions. I can absolutely prevent them from doing something, like if they're all eating and a whole bunch of guests are watching them eat and then I walk by, they might all fly away. And now I've just ruined this experience for all these guests, and I've stressed the birds out enough. So I have to be really careful about where I am. Is it going to affect them negatively? But then on the flip side, if I hear that they are messing with our sprinkler system, which is something that they do, that's a situation where it's very good that I show up, because then they do all fly away and they stop doing what they were doing. So I've gone over a little bit. These mischievous birds have been great. I think, again, whoever scheduled this picked a perfect time, because they're always active at this time of day, usually taking baths. They were fed this morning. They got a rack of ribs, and they got a couple big slabs of them, about 4. They don't really each sit on one rack and eat it individually. They're going to switch off one another and pull from the other. And I want what that one has, and, back and forth. And it turns into a mess, and they throw it off the cave, and it ends up all over the exhibit. And then it's our fun job to go find each individual rib bone. But that's half the fun, is being in this exhibit and searching around. They eat better than I do. They eat so well. They get the top quality meat. I think. And in the wild, they're going to go for the freshest possible meat that they can find. They are scavengers. They are going to go for carcasses. If they absolutely have to, because it's a matter of life or death, they will eat something that's been sitting out there for 10 days or more, but that's really not the best nourishment for them. And I think that they understand that. So they want fresh meat. We're going to give them the best that we can. We want to give these birds the best welfare possible, and giving them a really strong diet is good. They do get a mixture of rabbits, and they get whole rabbits, not alive. They're already deceased. And then the ribs, occasionally we'll give them rats. Sometimes we give them a big piece of a shank, a thigh bone area. Fish, occasionally, not as often. They don't seem to care about that as much. But rabbit is their favorite, I can tell you that. And then ribs, I just think they have a lot of fun with because they just throw it all over the place. Okay, so I think I will wrap this up unless anybody has any last minute questions about our 4 fabulous condors. I don't know if I mentioned it, and I apologize, but we do have 2 males and 2 females in there. And 3 of them are 4 years old, and 1 of them is 3 years old. And the 3-year-old is the one sitting in the tree up here, number 946, if I can read that tag correctly. I could be wrong about that. Let's see. Let's zoom in on him because he is pretty cute. Well, you can't see him. Sorry about that. But yeah, he is our young male. He will be, there he goes. He'll be turning 4 at the end of May. All of their birthdays, hatch days, excuse me, they have hatch days because they hatch out of eggs. All of their birthdays are in April and May. So all 4 of them will be turning a year older this year. And with every year that they get older, they lose a little bit of that head covering. And get a little bit more into their own self and really can start being more dominant if they want to, if they choose to. And their personalities will just get more obvious, I think. Sometimes they do act really similar. So the longer we have them, the older they get. They'll be easier to point out, even if you can't see their tag, based on who they're standing next to and things like that. Celebrate their hatch days. Yeah, usually last year we did put a little blurb on social media on each of their hatch days. And we're happy to have people celebrate them. It's a milestone when a condor lives another year. So if we can celebrate every condor that lives another year, then I will happily be a part of that celebration. And a party. I mean, why not? All their birthdays around each other, so we could just pick a day and kind of average the birthdays. I like that. That's a good idea. Yay. Cool. All right. Well, I will probably be leaving you guys at this point, unless any last questions or anything. No? All right, great. Well, cool. Awesome. It's a great talk. Next week, we'll be bringing you hopefully different information, different person, not sure. Hopefully you guys don't get too bored of me. And I hope you guys have a fantastic day. Please keep watching them. They're going to be doing this for like another at least half hour or so, if I can imagine. And then they'll roost up in the trees probably around 3 o'clock, and then we just won't see any more of them for the rest of the day. So yeah, have a great day, and I hope you guys have a good week. Bye.